protests are spreading across Iran amid a deepening economic crisis. According to Iran's semi-official Fars news agency, at least 5 people have been killed as demonstrations over the soaring cost of living expand to new parts of the country, though exact totals vary by outlet. The unrest underscores growing pressure on an economy battered by inflation, sanctions, and instability. Videos shared online claim to show fires in the streets and sounds that may be gunfire in several cities, but those clips cannot be independently verified. Reports describe a second day of protests and strikes in multiple locations, though the scale is hard to verify independently. The protests are driven by economic desperation, and Iran's currency has fallen sharply. Reports put it near 1,400,000 rials for a single dollar. International outlets cite inflation above 40%, and Iranian officials have acknowledged severe price pressure. For many Iranians, the currency slide and prices feel like an unfolding economic emergency. Shopkeepers and merchants launched the initial protests over the government's handling of the collapsing currency and runaway prices. For ordinary Iranians, the crisis means daily life has become increasingly unaffordable, a reality that is now spilling into the streets. The deadliest incidents have been reported in western Iran. In the city of Azna, in Iran's western Loristan province, at least 3 people were killed and 17 others injured, according to Fars news agency, though these figures cannot be independently verified. Videos circulating online claim to show a city gripped by chaos, objects burning in the streets, sounds that may be gunfire echoing through the night, and crowds chanting "shameless, shameless." These clips cannot be independently verified. Earlier, Fars reported that 2 people were killed in protests in the city of Lordagan in Shaharmahal and Bakhtiari province, south of Tehran. There, demonstrators reportedly hurled stones at government buildings, including the governor's office, a mosque, the town hall, banks, and the Martyrs Foundation, before police responded with tear gas, according to reports. Reports describe security forces responding with force in multiple cities. Footage shared online appears to show crowds on darkened streets punctuated by sounds that may be gunfire in the background, but these clips cannot be independently verified. State media reported a Basiji member was killed in Loristan during clashes, though accounts differ on the circumstances. Officials said a 21-year-old member of the Basiji, a volunteer force linked to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, died while defending public order. Footage shared online appears to show gunfire during clashes in Hamadan, but it's unclear who fired, and the videos can't be independently verified. In Tehran and Malard, tear gas reportedly filled the streets, and yet the crowds did not disappear, according to reports. The unrest has reached Tehran's commercial heart. Tehran's shopkeepers shut their stores. The Grand Bazaar and the historic heart of commerce joined the strike, according to reports. The Grand Bazaar is not just a market. It is a symbol of Iran's merchant class, a group that has historically wielded significant influence. When the bazaar closes, it sends a message. The merchants are not just protesting prices, and they are signaling their discontent with the government's economic management. Iran's National Truckers Union reportedly backed the bazaar protests, calling for unity and saying it is the only way out, according to reports. The protests have spread to universities. At universities, the chants reportedly grow louder. Students at the University of Tehran were surrounded by security forces but refused to be silent, according to reports. "Do not be afraid," they reportedly chanted. "Students may die, but they will not accept humiliation." University students have historically played a significant role in Iranian protests. From the 1979 revolution to the 2009 Green Movement to the 2022 to 2023 protests following Mahsa Amini's death. Their participation signals that the unrest extends beyond economic grievances to broader frustrations with the system. U.S. President Donald Trump has commented on the protests. Trump criticized Iran's crackdown on protests, but stopped short of calling for regime change. Asked whether he would support the overthrow of the Iranian regime, Trump said, "I'm not going to talk about overthrow of a regime." However, he described the situation in stark terms. They've got a lot of problems in Iran. They have tremendous inflation. Their economy is bust. Economy is no good. And I know that people aren't so happy. Trump also described the government's response to protests. Every time they have a riot or somebody forms a group, little or big, they start shooting people. You know, they kill people. "I've watched this for years," Trump continued. "There's tremendous discontent. They form 100,000, 200,000 people. All of a sudden, people start getting shot, and that group disbands pretty quickly. So I've watched it for years. They're vicious, vicious people." Other U.S. officials have also commented. The U.S. State Department posted videos of the nighttime chants. American officials say they stand with the protesters, according to reports. U.S. Ambassador to the UN Michael Waltz voiced support for protesters, saying people there want freedom and that we stand with them, according to reports. The U.S. has long maintained sanctions on Iran and has been critical of the government's treatment of protesters. However, U.S. support for Iranian protesters is complicated by history, including the 1953 coup and decades of tension between Washington and Tehran. Israel has also reacted to the protests. An Israeli minister posted a selfie wearing a cap reading, "Make Iran Great Again," according to reports. Israel and Iran are longtime adversaries. Israel has conducted strikes against Iranian targets and has long sought to counter Iranian influence in the region. The Israeli reaction highlights how Iran's internal unrest intersects with regional geopolitics. Exiled Iranian Prince Reza Pahlavi reportedly urged unity and called on security forces to join the people, according to reports. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has acknowledged the protests. For the first time since the unrest began, Iran's president spoke publicly about the situation. Pezeshkian acknowledged what he called protesters' legitimate demands and urged swift government action. If we do not resolve the issue of people's livelihoods, he warned on state television, we will end up in hell. He also framed the situation in terms of external pressure. We are engaged in a full-scale war. Right now, the enemy has placed most of its hopes on knocking us down through economic pressure. You cannot conquer a nation with bombs, fighter jets, or missiles, Pezeshkian said. To defeat us, they would have to come and face us on the ground. Pezeshkian continued his remarks with a call for national unity. And if they were to confront this nation on the ground, if we remain determined, united, and committed to working together to make our country proud, it would be impossible for them to bring Iran to its knees. The president ordered his interior minister to listen, to engage in dialogue, and to hear what he called the people's legitimate demands, according to reports. The government has promised dialogue with trade unions and merchants. However, the question remains whether dialogue will be enough to address grievances that have built over years of economic hardship. Alongside promises of dialogue, warnings have also been issued. Iran's prosecutor general says any attempt to turn economic protests into insecurity or unrest will face a decisive response, according to reports. Authorities say arrests have been made, but reported totals vary by outlet and are hard to verify independently. This framing, blaming external forces for internal unrest, is a pattern the government has used in previous protest waves. The dual approach of promising dialogue while threatening crackdown reflects the government's difficult position. Reports describe a surveillance dimension to the government's response. Some activists and residents claim warning texts are being sent, but there is no independent confirmation of who is behind them. Human rights lawyers reportedly responded with defiance. This reported tactic, using surveillance and warnings to discourage participation, represents another tool in the government's response. Whether it will be effective in suppressing protests remains to be seen. One image has captured international attention. In Tehran, a lone protester reportedly sat in the middle of the road as motorcycle units charged forward, according to reports. The moment is being compared by some to China's Tank Man, the iconic image from Tiananmen Square in 1989. The clip appears to show the person being pulled away, but the full context can't be verified independently. Such moments can become symbols that galvanize movements, or they can become forgotten footnotes. Which this becomes depends on what happens next. Iran has seen this pattern before, most notably during the 2022 and 2023 protests following the death of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old woman who died in police custody after being arrested for allegedly violating Iran's strict dress code for women. Rights groups and UN investigators have said past crackdowns led to large-scale deaths and mass arrests, though exact totals are disputed. Today, once again, rising prices, frustration, and fear are colliding, leaving the nation at a tense crossroads. The current protests began with economic grievances rather than social issues, but grievances can merge and expand. The immediate demands are economic. Our protesters want relief from inflation that has made basic goods unaffordable. They want a stable currency. They want the ability to make a living. These are demands the government acknowledges as legitimate, at least rhetorically, but addressing them requires resources the government may not have, particularly under continued international sanctions. The structural problems of Iran's economy, including sanctions, corruption, mismanagement, and isolation from global financial systems, cannot be solved quickly. Western sanctions continue to hammer Iran's economy. The U.S. has maintained extensive sanctions on Iran, targeting oil exports, financial transactions, and key sectors of the economy. These sanctions have contributed to currency collapse and inflation, though the government also bears responsibility for economic mismanagement. The sanctions were intensified after the U.S. withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal in 2018. Subsequent administrations have maintained or expanded them. For ordinary Iranians, the sanctions contribute to daily hardship, even as the government blames external forces for problems that also have domestic causes. The protests come at a particularly tense moment. International reports say U.S.-Israeli strikes hit Iranian military and nuclear-related sites, while Tehran disputes key details. These reported strikes, if confirmed, represent a significant escalation in the shadow conflict between Iran and its adversaries. The government has sought to frame economic hardship as the result of external aggression rather than domestic policy failures. Whether Iranians accept this framing or hold their own government responsible is part of what the protests are about. The government appears to be pursuing a dual approach. On one hand, officials insist they are seeking solutions to ease economic pain rather than immediately resorting to force. Reports say authorities appear more cautious than in past crackdowns. On the other hand, warnings of a decisive response and reported arrests suggest the government is prepared to use force if it deems necessary. This dual approach reflects uncertainty about how to handle the situation and perhaps disagreements within the government itself. Iranian officials have described their response as measured. According to official statements reported by Iranian media, protests are a legal right for people on various issues, and they could express their protests within the framework of regulations and laws as long as they do not disrupt public order and security. The statement continued. In the past 2 to 3 days, part of society, meaning our dear merchants, have had protests regarding economic issues, foreign exchange rate fluctuations, and rising prices. A very limited number of people took the protests to the streets and public places and disrupted public order. The police fulfilled their legal obligation, showed restraint, and we are moving towards calm. This framing, acknowledging legitimate grievances while blaming a limited number for disruption, is consistent with the government's public messaging. The geographic spread of protests is significant. Demonstrations have been reported from Kish Island in the south to Zanjan and Hamadan in the north, according to reports. In Tehran province, in Malard, on the islands, and in the heartland, the same words, the same rage, according to reports. This geographic spread suggests the grievances are not limited to one region or one demographic. They are national. When protests spread across multiple cities simultaneously, they become harder to contain. The involvement of organized labor adds another dimension. Iran's National Truckers Union reportedly backed the Bazaar protests, calling for unity, according to reports. Truckers have significant leverage in Iran's economy. Strikes by truckers can disrupt supply chains and commerce. Their involvement, if sustained, could escalate the economic pressure on the government. However, organized labor in Iran operates under significant constraints. Independent unions face restrictions and strike organizers risk arrest. The merchant class has historical significance in Iran. The Bazaris, as the merchant class is known, played a crucial role in the 1979 revolution that overthrew the Shah. Their support for the revolution helped legitimize it and provided crucial resources. When the Bazaar closes in protest against the current government, it carries echoes of that history. The government is aware of this history, which may explain both its promises of dialogue and its warnings against unrest. Young Iranians face particular challenges. Unemployment among youth is high. Economic opportunities are limited. Many feel their futures are constrained by factors beyond their control. The participation of university students in the protests reflects this generational frustration. Students have historically been at the forefront of Iranian protest movements and have often paid a heavy price for their activism. Their chants, "Students may die, but they will not accept humiliation," reflect both defiance and awareness of the risks. Women have played a prominent role in recent Iranian protests. The 2022 to 2023 protests began after the death of Mahsa Amini and centered on women's rights and the mandatory hijab. Women faced severe repression during those protests, but also demonstrated remarkable courage. Whether women are playing a similarly prominent role in the current economic protests is not fully clear from available reports. However, the economic crisis affects women as much as anyone, and the memory of the Mahsa Amini protests remains fresh. Iranians abroad are watching closely. Exiled figures, including Reza Pahlavi, son of the former Shah, have called for unity and urged security forces to join the people. The Iranian diaspora has limited ability to influence events inside Iran, but they can draw international attention and provide a platform for voices that cannot speak freely inside the country. Social media allows some connection between Iranians inside and outside the country, though the government has periodically restricted internet access during protests. Information control is part of the government's response. During past protests, Iran has restricted internet access, limiting the ability of protesters to organize and share information. Whether similar restrictions have been imposed during the current protests is not fully clear from available reports. The videos and reports emerging from Iran suggest some information is getting out, but the full picture may not be visible. International observers must acknowledge these limitations when assessing the situation. Iran's neighbors are watching the unrest. Instability in Iran has implications for the entire region. Iran is a major player in Middle Eastern politics, supporting groups in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. Any significant change in Iran, whether reform or collapse, would reshape regional dynamics. Neighboring countries have their own interests and concerns. Some may see opportunity in Iranian instability. Others may fear spillover effects. The regional dimension adds complexity to an already complicated situation. The protests occur against a backdrop of nuclear tensions. Iran's nuclear program has been a source of international concern for decades. Negotiations over the program have stalled. International reports say recent strikes targeted nuclear infrastructure, suggesting the conflict over Iran's program is intensifying. The government may try to use external threats to rally nationalist sentiment and deflect attention from domestic failures. Whether this strategy will work or whether Iranians will hold their government accountable regardless is part of what the protests will determine. Several scenarios are possible. The protests could subside either through government concessions, exhaustion, or repression. The protests could escalate, drawing in more participants and spreading to new areas. The government could crack down harshly, and as it did in 2019 and 2022 to 2023, or some combination, with varying levels of unrest and repression continuing for an extended period. Predicting which scenario will unfold is difficult. The situation remains fluid. Iran has a pattern of protests followed by crackdowns. The 2009 Green Movement saw massive protests over disputed elections. The government eventually suppressed them. The 2017 to 2018 protests over economic conditions spread across the country before being contained. The 2019 protests over fuel prices were met with a particularly harsh crackdown. Rights groups reported significant casualties. The 2022 to 2023 protests over Mahsa Amini's death lasted months but were eventually suppressed. This pattern suggests the government has the capacity and willingness to use force, but it also suggests that grievances persist despite crackdowns. The government faces a dilemma. The concessions could be seen as weakness, potentially encouraging more demands. Force could suppress protests in the short term but deepen long-term resentment. And the underlying economic problems remain regardless of how the government responds to protests. Without economic improvement, grievances will persist, even if individual protest waves are suppressed. The government's room for maneuver is limited by both domestic constraints and international pressure. International attention on the protests is growing. U.S. officials have voiced support. Israel has commented, media coverage is spreading, but international attention does not necessarily translate into action that helps protesters. In past protest waves, international statements of support did not prevent crackdowns. What protesters need is sustained pressure and practical support, both of which are difficult to provide from outside. The courage of Iranian protesters deserves acknowledgement. They are taking to the streets knowing the risks: arrest, imprisonment, injury, death. They are speaking out in a system that punishes dissent. Whatever happens next, their willingness to demand change despite the dangers is significant. The outcome is uncertain, but the courage is real. Iran stands at a crossroads. Protests are spreading across the country. Reports claim deaths, though exact totals vary. The economy is in crisis. The currency has fallen sharply. International outlets cite inflation above 40%. The government acknowledges legitimate demands while warning of decisive response to unrest. President Pezeshkian has called for dialogue. The prosecutor general has threatened crackdown. Security forces have used tear gas and, according to unverified footage, what may be gunfire. U.S. President Trump has criticized the crackdown but stopped short of calling for regime change. U.S. officials say they stand with protesters. The Grand Bazaar has joined the strike. Universities have seen protests. The truckers' union has voiced support. The streets are demanding answers. The government is struggling to contain the fallout. Whether this moment leads to change or becomes another suppressed protest wave remains to be seen. Iran has been here before. The 2009 protests, the 2017 to 2018 protests, the 2019 protests, the 2022 to 2023 protests. Each time grievances have been suppressed but not resolved. Each time the pressure has built again. Today, rising prices, frustration, and fear are colliding once more. The nation watches, the world watches, and the streets keep speaking. The outcome is uncertain, the stakes are high, and Iran's future hangs in the balance that the world is watching.